Ahoy! Welcome to What We Learned This Week, episode 17. I'm Liz.
And I'm Chalene.
Where it might not matter.
But we're going to talk about it anyway.
And to talk about it, we are excited to talk about all the things today. Chalene is our interviewee.
Yep.
She's going to tell us all about what she learned this week. Are you ready, Chalene?
I'm ready. So our church was doing an activity where they were talking about ancestors.
Okay.
Specifically, more pioneer ancestors that kind of had come across the plains, because we do live in Utah, and this was settled by pioneers.
Just in case you were wondering.
And as a child, I had no interest at all in learning about grandmas and grandpas or stuff like that. Did you have any interest?
Probably not. I mean, I loved grandma and grandpa, but I don't know. Stories were okay.
Yeah, maybe, I remember a lot of stories being shared, but I had no
drive to go do it myself.
Yeah, no connection, no desire to do it. History wasn't that interesting to me, especially because it's dates and places, and geography is definitely not my
That's just not
forte.
your...
No.
Is it the memorization behind it or what?
I don't know. I just don't have a very good sense of direction. I get lost in big hotels. I'm not lying. Like every time I get off the elevator, I turn the wrong direction. Steve's like, we have been here 3 times.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's just not my gift. But yeah, we did hear a lot of stories. But lately, I don't know how long I felt this way, but I love history now. And it's not the history of wars or leaders, politicians, or anything like that. It's mostly like what life was like for people back in the day.
Okay.
You take me to a living museum, which is, they have one close to here, which is like an old farmhouse, and you can go in and they have the original wallpaper and
like people that aren't the living museums, the ones that have like interactive people there, like Williamsburg in Virginia. And when we were in England, it was, you go to a castle and there's actors.
Yes.
And okay.
Yeah. This one was more, it wasn't like people were living there and canning vegetables and stuff like that. But they weren't, I don't think they lived there full time. I think there was a caretaker, but they would do things like someone would do in that house. So when you see like the way they cooked, like I'm fascinated by recipes and the way people did things back then. Every time I go to a historical place, I buy a cookbook. No surprise. And
I wasn't going to say that.
Sometimes they're updated, but sometimes they're not. And I look at the ingredients and think, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine having to boil, cow's hoofs to get gelatin to make
whatever they were going to make
aspic or whatever gross stuff they made.
Yeah.
And I'm just fascinated by their clothing. And I went through a little phase where I wanted to wear retro dresses. The 40s is my favorite.
Oh, really?
And I have a huge collection of 40s cookbooks and wartime, because they had rationing cookbooks. And so they had all of these recipes that they could use without butter, because they didn't have butter.
Right.
It all went to the war. And so most of it was like oil. One of my most favorite chocolate cake recipes came from this.
Is it a mayo one?
No.
Oh, darn.
It's cocoa, but it's like
vinegar?
So dark and delicious.
Really?
Yeah, it's really good.
I feel like you should bring that on the show so we can sample.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
We probably should have had
fresh
one
raspberries
today.
on the top. So good.
This is from my 40s.
They also made some really, really gross things. I had a blog for a minute called Retro Recipes, and I would make things from it. And there was one that was like, I think it was peanut butter and American cheese sandwich. And I thought, those poor people.
Why?
I don't know. They were really interested in processed cheese back then.
Oh, yeah, that was a thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like pimento spreads and things like that?
Oh, yeah. And American cheese on everything. I don't know if it's just because it was super melty.
Was it
I don't know.
all you could get? I mean, okay, so question really fast then. Wasn't it just based, though, on that's what they could get? So then that's where the fascination came from?
It could be.
Whenever we go to Hawaii, that's kind of the concept, right? Like there's Spam everywhere. Well, that's because during the war, there was a lot of Spam shipped to the island so people could eat.
Oh.
And so the people came to love Spam. I don't know. When I was a kid, it was like our poor food when we were really hungry. And
I have never
we'd crack that open and eat that with cabbage. That was our corned beef and cabbage. Was
really? Yeah, I bet it's delicious because it's really fatty. Is it good?
It's super salty. I like it.
I smelled someone frying some in college. I think they were foreign, probably. I think people in foreign countries eat a lot more Spam than we do in America. Do you think?
Or maybe they just find something cheap to eat because it's college and they're trying to survive.
I don't know, but she was frying up slices of it. We had like a community kitchen, and I was like, my mouth was totally watering.
You're like, can I taste some of your Spam sandwich?
Yeah, I wasn't brave enough to do that, but
maybe you'd have made a friend, Chalene.
I know. I could have used a friend back then too. Shoot.
More Spam sandwiches for you.
So I wanted to share one story though, when I was little, that my grandma shared with me when I did not ask, right? We have those stories that they sit down and tell you. And my grandma, this is my dad's mom. She was Minnie, Grandma Minnie, but she didn't like Minnie, so she went by Laverne. I don't know if that matters.
It does matter. Thank you.
Okay. But both my grandmas actually were named Minnie. Isn't that
really
crazy? Mm-hmm. That's my middle name. Grandma Laverne Burke. She lived on a farm, and we would go out every couple of years to visit. And
this is the same one that killed the rooster, right?
Oh, yeah. I forgot that story. Yeah. This is the rooster grandma. And she liked the shock.
Tuned. One day you guys need to you'll hear the rooster story. We won't share it today.
No, it's a good one though. Anyway, so my grandma liked shock, I think. She...
Like shock value?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually do too. So I probably get that from her.
I've never known that.
Ever. But she would tell us this story. And it was about her great-great-grandma or something. And her great-great-grandma's mother had died.
Okay.
She'd been sick for a while. And so this was back in the day when kids didn't talk to their parents without being spoken to first. So kids were to remain silent. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
do not speak unless spoken to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Children were seen and not heard, which is very opposite of today. Anyway, so they had a funeral for her. And at the funeral, the girl could hear something in the coffin, but she wasn't allowed to talk. So afterwards, she went up to her dad and she's like, Dad, I think that there might be an animal in the coffin with Mom. And he said, oh, that's horrible. So they decided to open it up, and she was alive and had scratched the coffin and had like splinters up her fingernails because she was trying to get out or let people know she's in there. And because she wasn't dead, but now she was. And we always thought, oh my gosh, that's so creepy.
Yeah.
And
something
then
you told it firesides.
Yes. Right? And then as I grew up, I heard way more people tell that story that their grandma had told them too. So I don't know if there's like a grandma convention or if there was like a magazine that they sent out and said, tell your grandkids this story.
So they're scared. No,
I have no idea. But have you heard that story before?
I have. The variations that I heard were ones that I remembered, I think when I lived in England and we were doing like British history. And it was, and I could be smushing a lot of things together. Okay. This is the memory of a 10-year-old. Wait, 12. I don't remember how old I was there. 11, 12. And it was the history behind why there were gravekeepers, like cemetery keepers, because they had to go around at night and listen for the tinkling of bells because they started figuring out that they didn't know. This is a long time ago. Like they were talking probably, I don't know, post Black Plague, right? We just didn't know how to tell when people were dead. Seriously. And they had to, somehow they'd found out that people weren't necessarily dead when they were getting buried.
And this was like real. This isn't just like a Victorian.
No, for real. Like this part is real, where there was a string or something that led into the coffin. So, and tied to their finger.
I've heard that. I mean, now that you say that.
Yeah. So they could pull it and the string was attached out of the grave and run through like a little hook or something with a little bell at the end. And so if they heard the tinkling of bells.
Okay, but did a
ring
bell...
around the rosy. Hold on. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of... Isn't that where that would come?
No, ring around the rosy is about...
Pocket full of posies, ashes, we all fall down.
Like mumps or measles or something like that.
That was a Black Plague, actually.
Oh, okay. Black Plague.
Yeah. But anyways, they had to go around and...
So really people would ring them, though?
Yes. Well, yeah, if they'd been buried and just...
Yeah, but if you've been in a coffin for that long, been through a funeral, and under that dirt, you'd be smothered by then.
No way, man.
Really?
Yeah, they were alive. They had to dig them up. It was a thing. We should Google it right now.
Okay, if you're out there,
Google it for us and tell us.
I don't know. I'm an unbeliever. I'm an unbeliever for right now.
Didn't you say that your cousin or something had done some...
No, my cousin needed to write a paper for school, so she called my grandma and said,
got this story again?
Yeah. And so that made it legitimate. I don't think it's legitimate. I don't know. Grandma, maybe it is. I just really think it's one of those stories that you just tell your grandkids to kind of freak them out.
I love it, actually. Okay. Those kind of stories.
Do you have a story like that? Like a freak out?
I don't think scary one. A freak out one, but my grandpa was just notorious too, to some degree, for shock and awe. My dad's dad.
Really?
Yeah, we adored him. Oh gosh, all my memories of him are super fond. I mean, I hear he was kind of a strict man. He was a school teacher.
Okay.
And ran 6th grade. And one year when we lived in Berlin, the wall was coming down. The Gulf War had started. Wow. It was a mess. And my dad was put on, I don't know, some horrible guard duty of 24 hours, whatever, crazy 12-hour shifts, holding guns, the whole bit. And was just, you guys need to go back to the States. This is too dangerous. So we finished out my 4th grade year, I want to say, up at the same school. We lived with my grandparents, and we went to the same school my grandpa taught at.
In Germany?
In California.
Oh, in California.
My dad sent us from Germany to California. We lived with my grandparents, went to the same school as my grandpa. So we go over with him in the morning to school, and he'd teach. And my grandpa was the disciplinarian at the school, not the principal. So if you were naughty in class, you didn't go to the principal's office. You went to Mr. Bates.
and what was the discipline?
He was just, I don't know. He had this ability to command groups. He just did. Apparently, there's stories of when he started teaching, maybe you'll appreciate this being a teacher, where he would not smile at the students for the first half of the school year. So they thought he was the meanest. And then after Christmas, he would smile. So they just, I don't know if he played games, but it was his way of like...
That was his classroom management.
It was his classroom management. And I remember taking students over that had been naughty in my 4th grade class and had to take them to his class. And they had to do, probably dust chalkboards.
Oh, so we weren't talking like wrapping knuckles with rulers.
No, I'm not that old. Come on now.
I was kind of thinking
this was like
disciplinarian. Whoa.
Yeah, no, but the way, however he was strict enough and handled things, that's where they went. It wasn't the principal's office. And anyways, that was just my grandpa. He was the one that was like, "Okay, you want an ice cream sandwich in the middle of the night? You can wake me up." And
really?
We did. Yeah, he'd make us ice cream sandwiches. We'd sneak vegetables out of his garden. He would get mad about that. He had an amazing garden. We ate huge family meal. Like I don't know. He just was.
So did he grow up in the Depression?
He grew up just at the tail end of it.
Okay.
Close to the end of I want to say 10 or 13 kids. And his mom had passed.
Oh, wow.
With one of his younger siblings. And the younger 2, I think, were set off with older sisters. That's how many.
Oh.
So that they could be taken care of. And so his dad had to run this roost of kids on nothing. And so a lot of his stories were, we had one pair of shoes. I remember when I lost my one pair of shoes and that was it for the whole year. Just things like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Your favorite era. Yeah. So there's those kind of stories. But
that's cool. Wow. Grandpa Bates. I like it. Bates. Yeah. My grandpa. So my grandma that I just talked about, Minnie Laverne, I don't remember, married Raymond, and he was stationed out here for World War II.
Stationed at Hill?
Mm-hmm. And in 21 days, they met and got married.
Oh my gosh.
And she went back to his farm, didn't even know anyone. Everyone thought she was pregnant, but she wasn't. And my grandpa was he's a very hard worker, very honest.
Yes. But
a man of very few words. Mm-hmm. All I wanted to do was make my grandpa laugh, and it was very, very difficult. He never talked about the war, never talked about his childhood. I don't really know anything, but before he died, one of my cousins asked him to write some stories down, and he talked about the war. Really? And the one thing I can remember is that he talked about, there was this freckle-faced boy. I feel like everybody in the military back in the war had this freckle-faced boy that was annoying.
Yeah.
So he would fix planes at the Air Force Base. Well, I guess it was Army base back then. And when a plane would come back, they would scavenge it to see what was left over. Mm-hmm. And so this freckle-faced boy was kind of pushy and went into the plane and found these boots. And so he pulled on, he's all excited, but there were legs still in him.
Oh my gosh. He didn't know? He didn't see it at first?
No.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, Grandpa, that was a real scary story. I like that one.
Why didn't you share that all those years? Probably because it was real scary. Remember? Compartmentalization.
True. But anyway, I really liked that. So I've just been really fascinated by the people that have lived before me, and especially the ones that were related. I have this pride inside of me.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Do you feel that?
I do. Do you think it comes from, I don't know, does it help you understand more of who you are, do you think? Is that why some of that has been more important in these latter years for you?
I don't know. There's I just feel a lot of pride for the things that they've gone through and that I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it.
Uh-huh. I have a couple pioneer stories I actually happened to learn in the last week or so. Too.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to share one?
Let's see. Which one do I want to share? This one was kind of cool. Part of the reason we ended up learning our pioneer stories more recently was very similar to yours. There was an activity at church where it was discussed a little, but I have a son who's doing a simulation experience for pioneers right now. It's called Trek, and he's out pretending to be a pioneer for 2 to 3 days, just walking across.
With hand carts.
With a hand cart, yeah. So if you're unfamiliar with the pioneer movement, some went in wagons and had oxen, you know, the kind of, what game was it that we played forever in like second?
Oregon Trail?
Oregon Trail.
I never played it.
Oh man, you missed out.
I know. It must be like a West Coast thing.
It was a I didn't live here thing.
Oh.
I played it in England in 5th grade.
Maybe we were just too poor. I don't know.
You were too poor. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Maybe our school was bored. But
no, my husband played it.
Oh. Have you seen? I was
too busy playing Carmen Sandiego, probably.
Oh, I loved Carmen Sandiego.
Oh, me too.
Have you seen this like vintage Oregon Trail card game they have out now? You can like get it at Target. It's like, you've contracted the swine flu. Not swine flu. What is malaria? Die. You know, one person in your tent dies or whatever. It's terrible.
That sounds kind of fun.
It actually was really fun.
Yeah.
You know, we just wanted to see if we could beat the odds and make it to the end, right? Like, make it to Oregon. There were a lot of groups that actually also came over pulling hand carts because they couldn't afford wagons. And the whole reason they were crossing the plains was for religious freedom, was for independence. Sometimes it was to gather with a particular group of religious individuals. Other times it was just to settle the West because there was promises of land. But in particular,
and gold too in California.
There's a lot of other reasons and variations for why they did what they did. But this particular group in our church history is considered a famous group of individuals that came across the Willie and Martin Handcart Company. And even if you're not familiar with, you know, all things Utah religion.
And was the Donner Party with them?
No. Yes. I don't remember. I don't know.
For some reason, I was thinking that they were kind of left at the same time, but anyway.
I couldn't tell you. We'd have to look it up.
I'm sure most people know about the Donner Party.
Most people know about the Donner Party, but think that time frame.
Yes.
And you'll be fairly accurate. So this particular Edward Martin and what was his first name? Willie?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, anyways, Willie and Martin were two different individuals. They had their own companies of...
And a company meaning like... A group of people with hand carts.
Yes. Okay. So like there was 500 something in their company. Not everybody was pulling a hand cart, but a good portion of them were. And
did each family have their own, or do you think that they had multiple? Do you know?
If they could afford one and put one together, they did. And sometimes, like if there was only one or two people or singles, they would be assigned a hand cart with a group of people.
Oh, okay.
There were wagons, I believe, if I remember correctly, for those that were too sick. Some of them rode in the hand carts if they were too sick to travel. I mean, the stories are fascinating. Like you're saying, right? The pride that we have in finding out what people lived through and the experiences they had.
Yeah.
And these groups that crossed the plains, this particular one is so memorable or was so historical because they started too late in the year. And they were very unfamiliar with something had happened where there was, I don't know if a miscommunication is the best way to describe it, but they ended up so this particular group, from some of the information I have, it was in Nebraska Territory, Missouri River area, needed to get to Utah to settle, you know.
Well, they wanted to start, right?
Yeah.
Start their lives and
build houses, crops, all that other stuff. But because they got started so late in the season, they ended up in a catch-22. They couldn't stay through the winter because they didn't have the supplies they needed. They hadn't been farming all summer to be able to even feed themselves through the winter. So they took a risk. The wood was not able to be cured, I guess, the way that it normally is when they build the hand carts.
It was green wood, yeah.
It was green wood, yeah. So they're trying to put it together as quick as they can. And travel is the long and short of all of that. And by October, they were already starving and had to ditch a lot of supplies because it was so heavy. I mean, just as an example, the particular ancestor I'm referring to is a great, I don't remember how many times back, Isaac, which one of my children is named after this one. We actually found it in our genealogy chart, and we loved the name, and it went really well with my husband's middle name. So Isaac Wardle.
And is this your side of the family, or your
husband's? This is my husband's side, actually. So his mom's side, several grandfathers back, he was 20 and was assigned to a hand cart. And in this one cart, they had to pull 100 pounds of flour, all the supplies and tents they needed for 7 people. a human. There was an 18-year-old girl that couldn't walk. She was in there. And I think something else. So it's pretty heavy.
Right.
Over, mountains and hills and across water. All these things. So by October, they had so overloaded some of their things, they just kept ditching supplies. They thought they would get there sooner or quick enough that they didn't need their winter gear. And they didn't even have some of it, let's be honest. By the time they'd gotten out there, they just didn't have, they'd come from the East Coast by train to that particular depot. That's what I'm remembering now, in the Nebraska Territory, Missouri River area.
Okay. Was it winter quarters?
I think so.
Okay.
That sounds right. It started to snow and it only got worse from there. So the beauty of the story goes, I guess, his particular journal with some memories is after continual lack of food and supplies, they were down to like a quarter cup of flour a day.
It was 4 ounces, right?
Yeah. Traveling how many miles? 15, 20, whatever they could get in.
I don't know.
And that was on a good day, probably because if the weather's bad, but you had to keep walking to keep warm. Mm-hmm. He said he got to Martin's Cove, which just happened to be a stop out in Wyoming near the border before you get into Utah. There was a group of people that had been sent from Utah to go find them. To
rescue them.
Yeah, to basically rescue them because they heard of how dire the situation was because the snow had come early. They'd run out of supplies. Nothing went the way it was supposed to.
Right.
And this particular group, when they arrived into the camp, sent him to go chop firewood. And he was ready to be like, yeah, no, can't do it. They found him and I guess he was curled up in the ice, just not moving. He was ready to be done. But he said that he decided and had decided a long time ago that he would be obedient. And in his case, it was important to be obedient to God's will. Mm-hmm. And he was given a task and he would do it. So he felt like he should do it. He got up, chopped all the firewood, brought it back down to the camp. And several other people, unfortunately, did pass that night, but he did not. And then the rest of the rescue party showed up within, a day or two after that, and he made it to Utah safe. He lived to be the ripe old age of in his 70s, 70s and 80s.
Which is kind of old for back then, right?
Yeah, and after the health problems that could possibly happen to you after surviving on 4 ounces of flour a day for months at a time.
Yeah.
Hypothermia, freezing. But he attributes it to obedience and quite possibly to keeping warm, chopping all the trees. And apparently there's 2 stumps out there from the trees he chopped.
Really?
Yeah. So we're going to take our kids one time to go check it out. But we just learned this all this time. My father-in-law had this story and we didn't know. Do you have any stories like that
cool.
you've kind of found out about?
So yeah, I have an ancestor that was actually in the Martin handcar company.
So they were in the same one?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Her name was Mary Soar Taylor Moore. Okay. So she lived in England, was married, had 2 boys. She said that her husband wasn't particularly religious, but then after her second child was born, he died.
Oh.
And then she joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So they decided they wanted to come west to kind of be with their people, Mm-hmm. And so they came over with that group. And the story that my mom told me when I was younger is that there was this grandma who they were really, really cold. And so she put all their blankets, all their coats, everything on top of them. And then she would lay on top of them. And then her toes died and they had to cut them off.
Oh,
that was the story she told.
That's how you heard it growing up.
Yeah, that's how I heard it growing up. And since then, we found some more details about her. So she was in Martin's Cove as well. And that's when her toes did end up dying because she was so cold. And I think she did lay on top of her boys. One of her boys caught mountain fever and died shortly after they made it to Utah.
Oh, they got through the whole thing and then he ended up passing away. That's so sad.
And then her other son made it and lived a really great life. But they talked about how she did make it back, or when she made it to Utah, her toes were completely black and they had to cut them off. And then she had to learn how to walk again because, toes give you a lot of support.
So all of them didn't have any of them.
Mm-mm. Yeah. But she talked about how she would do it again.
Wow.
Because of, that she felt like she really needed to do it and be there. And I thought too, there's things worse than death.
Sure.
Right? Like going through that
Having
and
my
suffering.
Toes chopped off sounds pretty awful.
Yeah. There's a lot of history out there, a lot of really interesting stories. And it makes me know them. It makes me want to know them more.
Sure.
My mom's mom died when she was 8, so I never knew her biological mom.
Oh.
And she tells me that's where I get my poop jokes from, because she told like all the poop jokes. And she's like, you come by it honestly. So whenever my husband gets mad at me, I'm like, I come by it honestly.
Yeah.
It's in my
genes.
DNA. Yeah. So that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about a little bit today is Liz has a little bit different perspective because of her yoga training, I would guess. But I've heard people say that we have memories or our ancestors. We do have our ancestors' DNA, right? Like we know that because it's passed down. But it's talking more a little bit, I guess, on a psychological level. Would it be psychological level more than just physical? Like we talk about the physical manifestations, right, of our traits, and those that get passed down.
Sure. Yeah.
But there is research that talks about, actually, there's been some research done where people have done studies with mice and rats that they can condition them to like do a maze.
Okay.
And then when they have offspring, those offspring aren't starting at square one. They're already knowing part of it before those particular offspring can manage the they don't know
easier or what?
Yeah, it's easier and it's faster for them to learn. I guess there is a game called Assassin's Creed.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it.
You have? Mm-hmm. Well, that kind of talks about, I didn't realize this, it's that they can remember their memories of their ancestors. Did you know that? Kind of makes me want to play it now.
Interesting. Isn't it a
shooting
like
game?
A first-person shooter style as well?
I would guess, but I thought that was a really interesting premise. So they've been studying this for a little bit, trying to find out if this is like a real thing. They had a Dr. Barrett Brogard from the University of Miami, but he's a philosopher.
Okay.
So he's talking about cognitive traits being passed.
Okay.
He kind of related it more that it could be our instincts. Kind of
rather
like,
than a memory that we've held from that particular ancestor. Okay.
Yeah. But there's no scientific proof. And I don't know how you could have scientific proof on this, really, unless you were studying a family for generations and generations and generations.
Right.
But I've never had a memory from an ancestor personally. Have you?
I have not.
Okay.
That I can recall.
Do you know one?
Well, I've had some interesting, this gets into a little bit of maybe metaphysical or mystical type of stuff. I've seen a shaman a couple of times. I have a dear shaman friend.
Explain what a shaman is.
So a shaman, by definition, it says they use magic for curing the sick and so forth. But they were considered the mystics or the healers, maybe the ones that you would go to in different types of tribes and cultures. I've heard them associated with Native American, with Hispanic. Her grandmother is from Mexico.
Okay.
And so she feels like her lineage, I guess you could say, comes from that line. And the idea is that they're very in touch with the other side. And if you've ever heard of the term shamanic journey or something along those lines, the idea is that you're going to, if I remember correctly in how I'm saying this, she described it as when she takes me on a journey or I'm going through this process with her when she's doing a shaman session, we are going to, it's called the underworld.
Okay.
But it's not the underworld like what we think of in Greek mythology where all the dead people went. Like it's not
it's not like Coco?
No.
Okay.
No. But it is supposed to be a place where those that have passed on and those that are still living can communicate.
Okay.
So that's
like a middle ground.
Yeah. It's considered a little bit more like that, if I'm saying it right.
Okay.
If I'm explaining it right. And one of the reasons that you do that particular work is because once a person dies, right, they can't do their emotional work the same. They can't do their spirit work the same because they don't have a body to do it.
Okay.
And
so can I ask like what some spirit work would be?
So, for example, one of the reasons that I have gone personally, and this is Liz getting really personal for a second.
Vulnerable, thank you.
It's kind of hard because this is stuff that I think about and talk about sometimes in my inner circles, but I know could feel very uncomfortable to others. And so this is never to share with this is the way it is. I just know that I have been drawn to this kind of work because I personally 100% believe we carry the memories and experiences of our ancestors. I have not had a direct dream memory of it.
Okay.
but I grew up with the stories, just like you talked about, growing up with the stories of the poop jokes from your, your grandma. My grandma on my maternal side had a hard marriage life experience. She got married in the 50s. The story goes that she had told her parents that she didn't feel right about marrying this person. And it was, well, you're going to embarrass us and we paid for this already. And he's a great guy. He's handsome and he's, smart. So you'll be fine.
Wow.
And unfortunately, he was abusive, but more of in an emotional way.
Okay.
Primarily, I think is probably a safe way to say that. My mom always says her memories of him are he was just incredibly smart, but he couldn't hold. Did you ever see the movie Catch Me If You Can? Where the kid could just manipulate almost anything by learning enough about it and putting it on.
Oh, yeah.
And I imagine my biological grandfather being a little like that.
Okay.
I'm not sure that it was, he didn't go around pretending to be a captain in a plane or anything, but he changed jobs all the time because he would max out or get bored or he figured it out too quick or whatever. My mom said that by the time she was 10, she counted that they had moved, and we probably should have interviewed Mom for this.
Yeah.
They'd moved 50 times.
In how many years? 10 years?
10 years. And that was all the addresses that they could remember when she wrote them down with her mom. And he eventually did leave because there were some very traumatic memories that my mom has of some violent situations and other, he unfortunately was not honorable all the time to his marriage with my grandma.
Did he drink? Did he have addictions?
I don't think he had, well, not those kind. I think women were his addictions.
Oh, okay.
So eventually he walked out the door and never came back. And ever. My mom never, ever, ever, ever saw him. Wow. We found out in the last couple of years when he died. But my grandmother, in later years, all I ever knew her as was very, very sick. She had lupus in her last few years. And all the complications that come with lupus, an autoimmune disease, is that your body shuts down and basically eats itself. Like the organs just degenerate is probably the best way to say that, maybe.
Your body's fighting against the organs like they're a disease.
Yeah. So there's a lot of trauma that happened on that side of my family, I feel like. And I have felt this pull from her ever since I've known these stories that she's still looking for healing and closure, I guess, for those kind of things, right? Like
she just never was able to deal with it. She just kind of lived her life, but never dealt with the emotions, something like that. Yeah, or just kept getting pushed away, or that was the best that she could do to some degree in this life. She maybe not had any tools. Right. To do that. What was available to her then? I'm not sure there was a whole lot. Think of how much just from a medical standpoint we've come. I have an autoimmune condition that is completely 100% maintained by a biweekly shot. Right. And I'm fine. I can live a full, very full, functional life. I'm not so sure. My grandma went all over for all kinds of kooky treatments and what about this and what if you did this, and apparently the emotional trauma with the first husband was traumatic enough that there was his way of dealing with, and the story also goes that when things didn't go well, he would just commit her, and she was committed a couple of times. And if you've heard any stories about sanatoriums in the 60s, these are not 50s. These are not great places. Do you think it had to do too, and I don't want to, get on a man-hating thing, but husbands had a lot of say in their wives' lives. Absolutely. There was, again, in the 50s and 60s. If we go back to tools, she didn't have a lot of tools, right? Yeah. She was at the mercy of her husband. When he left her, she was considered the, scarlet letter, blacklisted, you couldn't keep a husband. Wow. But on top of that, must be an adulterer, even though he was the one that had done the things that he'd done. I just think, again, there just were not things that could be done and dealt with the same back then. Oh. So, going back to my shaman sessions, that's the kind of work that we do, right? Like if she has a message that, is important and pertinent to my life, or we just revisit some of those old memories or situations. I've never had an experience where we talked much about what she might be saying. It's not like psychic stuff, right? Okay. Or where we're sitting in a seance and she tells you that
this happened, this one. It's not that kind of
There's
stuff.
a black key in the third drawer.
Yes, yes. Or find. When she was 10 and climbed this one ladder into the barn. Like there's just, it's not that. It's really kind of hard to describe.
Okay.
But it is a situation where I always come back feeling very, like I've done something good for them. I feel very connected to my grandma. And I also feel that whatever those particular things, maybe emotionally or even psychologically, that she could have been dealing with that could be somewhat passed down the line, I've worked on not only for her, but for myself and how those affect me and my family.
Wow.
So that's my personal, very heavy.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I don't really know where I stand on it. I mean, there's part of me that thinks like, oh, that's awesome. Like, yeah, that's great. And part of me thinks,
you're a quack.
I can't see it, so I don't believe it. I have a really hard time with stuff like that. I guess it's faith. Like, I struggle. Like
when we start talking about feelings, how can you ever justify that? Because a lot of what I have in those experiences is just how I feel. Mm-hmm. So does that make any of it real? I don't know. It's real to me. Yeah. And I feel pretty good about it. And I feel clear.
It's not harming you. So.
Right. And I love that you say that, because here's my personal, like, if we could wrap all of this into a 10-second takeaway.
Okay.
You know, we talk about in health, the placebo effect, and is it all in your head? Does it really work? And here's the thing I feel like indirectly, even you have told me over and over again, the power of thought is a big deal, right?
Right.
And if we just recognize, at least in that there's power, that not that it can change everything. It's not, I'm not saying that thought is the only.
Yeah, but it's a huge in my opinion, it's a huge overarching thing in our lives. Like it's this umbrella.
It is.
And we get to choose to believe whatever we want, right? Whether we believe the truth or I had a professor in college and he would always talk about capital T truth and small t truth.
Oh, I love that.
And I could never figure out what small t meant.
There was a small t meant
yeah,
to be
it was
personal?
lowercase. Like I could never figure it. Anyway, that's another story.
You took it very literal.
I did.
Small t, what?
But what I loved is he talked about how like a capital T truth is a universal truth. And it's just true no matter what. You can't.
Right. There's facts, science, all that stuff behind it. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, he did. And then he talked about the small t truth or lowercase truth is what you believe to be true.
Based on your experiences or your
beliefs,
insights,
your faith, whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he said sometimes they equal each other and sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that there's universal truths that exist. Yeah. I really do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have the opportunity to choose what you want to believe is truth if it serves you. And if it's not serving you, then I think you should question it.
Absolutely. You know? That is precisely what I'm getting to with that 10-second wrap up is that's the reason there is power in that. If you think yoga is going to be crap for you, then it probably is. Yeah. And it doesn't serve you and you don't have to do it. That's what's right. Even better, right? Mm-hmm. It's not there because you should, because it'll, help you meditate better and you'll have more flexible joints. Great. But if that's not in your scope and it just doesn't serve any of that for you, then don't do it.
Yeah.
I had one mentor, I adore her. And she always said, if it feels like crap, don't do it. The end. Right?
Right.
And she was the one that really had me deeper. I don't know. She really fostered this deeper understanding of feeling like there's a genetic connection.
Really? How so?
Well, in her particular case, her mother was a survivor of Auschwitz.
Wow.
So this woman experienced...
Was she a child in Auschwitz then?
I don't think so. I think she was a young adult, if I can remember correctly. She might have been latter. I don't... Those are a little fuzzy because she only would skirt the information. She didn't... I really wish
So she could be like 100 years old today.
If she was still alive, that's possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unfortunately, she committed suicide. And so my mentor's experience with that type of pain and memory that she witnessed in her mother and from her mother's experiences is just a very unique perspective. She is a fantastic and gifted writer. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we could probably... I feel like it's okay to be able to include her information, just if anybody's interested in reading some of her experiences. One of her most recent posts, she keeps up, I think it's a writing blog or something of that nature. She did a special cadaver lab where she was able to have just that experience because she didn't have it for medical training specifically, but it was an opportunity to
see the human body, which I think
absolutely, which is
healers
massive
should have. I just watched the doctor today feel my son, and she can feel like what's out of place. And I just thought, oh, how cool would that be to be able to feel,
just know
those are the intestines, if I could feel my belly and it just feels like bread dough, like it just, I don't know.
I can relate to that, especially when anyways, good times. So with that experience, she talks a lot about how death was just a very different thing for her growing up. She thought all grandparents didn't exist because none of hers did because they had all been
killed.
Yeah. So in one of my trainings with her, she just talked a lot about how our cells hold those memories. They hold because it's emotion, because it's a charge. And
so she's coming from a more of an energy standpoint then?
Yes.
Not like a physical memory.
Yes.
Okay. So if you
think about it from that standpoint, I mean, is there scientific proof behind it? Feels like there could be. There's scientific proof behind chakras. They found nerve bundles at all the points where chakras exist.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Kind of interesting, right?
Thanks for teaching me something today.
A little bit of science behind
awesome.
Some of your questions.
Yeah. Wow. That is so interesting. I don't know like I said before, I don't know what the pull is with finding out about my ancestors and wanting to name my children, like you said, with Isaac, and I named my children after people that were important to me.
Oh, really?
To remember them. Mm-hmm.
Were they ancestor names as well? Or just people?
Well, just people my dad and Steve's dad, and then Emmy, her middle name is Minnie, after me and after my grandma's.
So cool. So she gets to carry that.
Yeah.
Would you say that she's like what you've been told? I mean, haven't you been told also that you were the one that was the most like this particular grandma Minnie, or no?
I don't know that I most like her.
But just that you carry the name. Okay.
But I carry the name and I like poop jokes.
Oh, that works.
That's all I know. Yeah.
That's enough.
I did read a quote that was from a TED Talk called "Everything You Think You Know About Addiction Is Wrong." And it was by a British journalist, Johann.
Okay.
And I loved what he said. He said that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Oh, wow.
And connecting with members of our family, past and present, and learning their history fills this innate need in each one of us.
Wow.
And I thought how interesting that was, that it was totally not anything to do with families or anything like that. It was dealing with addiction.
Right.
Is that when we are addicted, are we really searching for a connection? Are we really feeling this, like we're this alone figure in the world floating around, that we have nothing to ground us? But when we can learn about our ancestry, like, is that a grounding? Do you feel like that's a grounding part of our lives?
I think so.
Yeah, I really liked that. Sorry, I read an article online. I don't know what it was. I Googled, why is ancestry important, or why is knowing your ancestors of value? So one of them was to connect. One of them was to learn compassion, looking at what they went through, maybe some of the struggles they went, so like your grandfather, who was not a very nice person to his wife, what happened to him? What made him who he was? If you had known that story, you might have a little more compassion, and then in turn use that compassion. If you find someone in your life who's being abused by someone else, having
absolutely
that compassion for them, realizing, okay, they came from somewhere.
Well, and I think that information is just so important. I think I spent a lot of years really wanting to hate him, thinking that he had just so negatively affected the line for a lot of years. And then there came a point where I can't even hold that kind of anger towards somebody I don't even know anymore. Right?
Right.
And I heard a fantastic, oh my gosh, we should include all these episodes, TED Talks, all of them. This one was a TED Talk on forgiveness. My brother sent it to me, and it was phenomenal. Wow. I mean, and basically the way the woman was able to help us understand forgiveness, because in her case, it was a very traumatic story. Her mother and brother were shot and killed by somebody they knew. So she had her whole life to live without them. And her story of learning how to forgive, right?
Yeah.
Was she didn't have to, the law had to do what it had to do for the debt to society. Mm-hmm. And she could never forgive them for what they did to her mother and brother, is how she said it. But she could forgive them for what they did to her. Does that make sense? So she's not responsible. It almost makes me emotional wanting to talk about it. It's just so heavy. But when I heard that variation, it was very clear to me. Like, the effects that he has had on just however, you know what I mean? The stories that I've heard and how I've seen that some of those hurts affected, subsequently that, it was a domino effect. There were some things that my mom has had to deal with that have been very difficult from having that as her witnessed experience for a lot of years. He was not a nice man to her. Right. Anyways, that's neither here nor there, other than I can't forgive what he did to other people, but I can forgive how it affected me.
Yeah.
I have power there. It helps me know more about myself, and maybe connection only just empowers us in some different way so that, I don't know, it feels empowering.
It does feel empowering. And the next
Where's this list from?
I will link it in the show notes. It talked about builds resilience, kind of like just what you were talking about. That is the empowering part of it, is that they got through it.
Oh my gosh.
Hopefully, mostly,
They're inspiring stories. Yeah, my life isn't what post Auschwitz or the Depression, but it is inspiring to know what the strength of the human spirit is.
Oh, yes. And the last one they talk about is self-worth. I guess what it's trying to say is that when you look at the way that your ancestors overcame their problems, can make it feel like you can do that too, and you're not a bad person. I don't know. What do you think, Liz?
So let's see. So self-worth. So kind of that you're connected by a higher power, even that there's something that exists other than you beyond. Oh, yeah. And so you feel maybe that is, so if there's a higher power involved, whether it's God, the universe, whoever you attribute that to, you can also feel that sense of worth then, right? Through
that you aren't just dangling. Matter.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I guess I feel like, when you are with other people, I don't know. But you're unique, but also that you have value and you have a place in this world, that it's not for everyone else, but it's for you.
Absolutely. You are the only Chalene that there ever was and will be, just like you.
Right.
There's no one else.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big deal.
You're kind of a big deal.
Okay.
Do you have many leather-bound books?
That's so embarrassing. I don't know.
And your library smell of rich mahogany.
Oh, jeez.
Shout out to
Ron Burgundy. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well, thanks for going on this journey with me. I really loved hearing those stories, and I want to hear
if we include Ron Burgundy in that. Just kidding.
I want to hear all the ancestor stories. I love it, and it makes me even want to start writing down some of mine.
You should,
so that I can remember. And I even tell my kids, "Hey, this happened to me. We know, Mom." I'm like, "I know, but I need you to know so you can remember when I'm gone."
You know how quickly they forget, though? I thought I told my kids some of those stories, and they have done the, wait, what? You lived in England? And I'm like, I swear I have told you since you were first born. So keep doing it. Who cares if they're like, we know, Mom.
I know. I really do like to hear myself talk, so it's a benefit for both of us, I guess.
You've got a great posterity thing going right here. They can listen to you anytime.
Yeah. So, get those. I actually had my grandma recorded tape.
Oh, really?
Of her memories, and just really, I don't know if I should share that story, but I don't have a tape player, but I really want to just get one and just be able to listen to her voice again and listen to her tell these stories. And I have a front and back, so there's got to be a lot of stuff on there, and I can't remember.
There's got to be a way to convert it. You should totally. Probably. I think there is, because I think we did something like that with my grandpa too. I want to say we recorded on a CD, and it's just one thing of him reading, I want to say, the Christmas story out of the scriptures, out of Luke or something like that.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, if you put it in an MP3 or something and can have that, just share a little I know, that'd be so cool.
That would be cool. If you ever come to Salt Lake, or if you live around here, they have a family history center, and you go in and you get these iPads and you plug it in, and it'll say who you're famous related to. And then it will go to another place, and you can stand in front of this mirror and it'll put clothes on you of where your ancestors are from.
So cool. It's free, right?
Yeah, it's free. And you can go back and record your family talking, and they can ask you questions, and you can do an interview that you can have in a digital format.
What?
Yeah. And it makes me feel so legit, because you're sitting on these couches that look like you're really being interviewed. I don't know. It's a really fun place.
Just a fun interactive activity, huh?
Yeah. And it kind of it does spark that curiosity of where you came from.
Yeah.
And that pride.
I'm seeing my kids catch it a little bit.
Really?
Yeah. I was worried that my oldest, when I was going to share the stories with him before he went on the trek, was going to be like, oh my gosh. Because he kind of does the, Mom, stop talking.
Right.
But I saw at the very end of our conversation, he had questions. His eyes got big. Wait, where did he go again when he chopped down those trees? Like I saw the wheels turning. Like,
yeah.
And to know that that was his grandfather that pulled, I think that was a big deal. I could see it, you know?
Yeah.
So it was cool. I'm so glad that this was your topic this week. This has been really fun to talk about.
It was really fun. Not too heavy.
Probably. But
probably was.
Sorry.
That's us.
It's going to happen. All right, Chalene, you got a question of the week for us?
I do. If you could live in any decade,
okay,
what decade do you think you would live in?
Oh, I have a fascination with, and I don't know why I'd want to go back to this time really, because we had like no rights at all.
Okay.
But I was fascinated growing up with the Middle Ages, honestly.
Like kings and queens and feudal system and all of that?
Yeah, all that crap.
Wow.
Like Henry VIII, that whole era was like, I ate that stuff up.
He was a tool.
Oh, he was we could go on and on. Other than the fact that he broke up the use of religion the way it was happening out in England at the time.
He did provide Bibles to people.
It was a big deal. There was a big shift.
He did do some good things, I guess.
With all the other crazy stuff that was going on over there. But the fascination, kind of came with that. And we did tour some castles and old systems back then, and it just was fascinating to me. Like,
do you think you'd like those heavy dresses?
I would hate all of it.
Oh, you wouldn't know any different.
But I wouldn't know any different, and I think that's why I would be so fascinated to go back and really live and just kind of semi-experience it.
Yeah.
Like I always wanted to know what like women did to take care of their monthly. Just all of that, right? Like
sure.
How what did they do to take care of their skin and hair and makeup, which back then they didn't really do a whole lot other than cover everything up and not shower. It would be that, or it would probably be Jane Austen times, because I was fascinated with the same thing then too. Like,
okay.
How did they do that? What did they do? What did they eat? They just sewed and rode horses all day? Like, what did they...
keep busy, yeah.
Right. The ones, like in Pride and Prejudice.
Because they had servants.
Right. She still had servants. And she was considered a lady, but they were too poor. I mean, like, it's just... The whole thing fascinates me. It just does.
And their dresses, I don't know if they really were like what they show in the movies, but I think they're gorgeous.
Some of them are so cute, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I could pull off a pair of gloves
could.
Up to my upper arms and a couple of ringlets on my side and something showing my décolleté.
Yeah, you could do ringlets on the side.
I could do it. I feel like I could do it.
I don't think I would look good with ringlets on the side.
They'd have to be done the right way. Do you like how... If you could see our faces right now, we're kind of questioning the ringlets. Where would you go?
I would actually go to the 1950s.
Oh, that's right. So 50s, not 40s? I thought 40s was your obsession.
Well, I love the 40s. And I really am obsessed with them. But I love the 50s because of the music was so fun.
It was fun.
I mean, I guess I could pick. But yeah, poodle skirts. I remember seeing Grease for the first time and being like, these are my people.
Really?
Yes. And I had a friend in high school who was like, Chalene, you should have lived in the 50s. I don't know why she said that. Just maybe I talked about it all the time.
Yeah, maybe.
But
that's funny.
Yeah, just... the fun, like, I don't know, I just picture it as fun, and like the cars were so cool, and innovation was starting to happen. And I don't know if you ever watched a YouTube video on the modern kitchen. Have you ever? Sorry, it always goes back to food.
I was going to say food. I probably haven't watched it.
But there's one where they had an old, I think it started like in the 40s, and they showed their kitchen, and it was very sparse. Like,
yeah.
I think they even had a wood burning stove still.
Probably.
And then they brought in all the stuff in the 50s, and it was like, they had a dishwasher.
That's why it was such a big deal.
And stuff would like pop up. I mean, it was like space age and like lots of metal. And I don't know, it just being alive in an innovative time like that would be so exciting.
It's so interesting because we really live in an innovative time now. But maybe because we have so many of those creature comforts, we don't see we don't see the innovation quite the same.
Yeah, it's just a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting.
And to me,
I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Because that would have been such a huge shift. And it was. That's why they talked about it all the time. And that's why it was such interesting.
Yeah. So I think that would have been a really fun time.
I'd go back with you.
To live in. You would?
Yeah. I'd follow you around. You could teach me what I needed to do.
I don't really love saddle shoes, but I don't know. I probably could get down with it.
Yeah, you'd be fine. Again, if that's all you do.
And they did wear skinny jeans, didn't they? They didn't wear jeans, but like those skinny pants.
Yeah.
Like Audrey Hepburn pants.
Yeah, that was a big deal. Starting to break out of those skirts,
You couldn't wear them to school, which would kind of bug me.
It would bug me too. I don't mind skirts though. I don't do dresses. I try to do dresses and I look weird.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks for listening to us today talk about all of our ancestors. I hope that maybe sparked some curiosity for you to go do that. We'll include a link that you actually can go and start your family tree if you're interested. If you're not, That's cool too. But
awesome.
Yeah.
And share some of your stories.
Yeah, I actually would really like that. Or some pictures. I don't know how you could share that with us, but
we'll have our website up by then. You can send us comments.
I would love if you shared a recipe that I could try, like a family recipe. I know some people are really weird about that.
You can share it on Facebook and Instagram.
But I would love to try your family recipe, like if it's an old one. I have this one, and my kids hate it. All me and my siblings think it's amazing. It's called Dutch pot pie, and it's not even like a pot pie like what you'd think. But we love it.
I'd eat that too. Basically, anything you talk about, I would eat. So,
oh, good.
Yeah, we need to do more of that.
Anyway, well, keep on learning.
Because it does matter.
And so do you.